Hello everybody and welcome to the Release 2020 webinar. The purpose of this session is to take you through the new features and application changes to the Engage in Unified platforms. These have been developed as part of the latest 2020.2 software release, which will be going live in May 2020. My name is Brendan Hobbs. I'm the Training and Education Director here at BlueVenn. I'm also joined by my colleague Dan Taylor, who's the Customer Success Director.
Thanks, Brendan. Hi all.
We'll be kicking off this by firstly looking at the changes to Engage. There are quite a few useful additions to the platform in this release. So in order to show you them, we're going to show you them in a real world environment. We're going to take you through a typical campaign journey. So Dan, we're looking here at a campaign that's been created ready for use, but we need to create an audience as well, right?
That's right. So we have the campaign here built with a few decision and field splits ready to go. So what we're going to do is take advantage of the brand new Venn multi-select feature to grab our audience very easily and quickly. So what we'll do is we'll start off building a new Venn diagram. And what we're going to do is just build a Venn diagram based on some spending habits. So we're going to look at people who have purchased low, medium or high value products. So we'll take our low, medium and high here. Now, as we know from the Venn diagram, this will display multiple different overlaps of data. So we have people who have purchased medium value products, high and low. So what we're going to do is find people who have purchased a high value product and also either a low or medium or both. So what we can do now with the Venn select is select the area we want, which we'll now highlight in gray. Now, originally, if we were to click on another cell, it would just select that instead. With the new Venn multi-select, what you can do is hold Control. Well, this will allow you to select as many segments as you want in one go. So now all three are highlighted in gray. You can see the top count here increasing, where we can use this to push into our upsell broadcasts. So now all of our selections are in our campaign. We'll now be able to use this audience in our campaign.
Okay, so we can now see that the audience has been created in this campaign that we built earlier. So just to go through what else we can see. So we can already see that we've got some decision splits in place. There's a tagging stage and a communication step, complete with a link to stage. So I suppose now, with all this ready, this is a good time to bring in another new feature which has been added to the platform, as it's now actually possible to trigger other campaigns to run following the completion of an original campaign. So this is all done via a new additional linked action section, which has been added to that campaign properties panel on the right-hand side. So this actually allows you to choose a campaign to be triggered on completion of the original campaign.
That's right. The great thing about this is you can build any campaign and set that to trigger an action against any other campaign. Now, you're not just restricted to runs. We could have a series of events where refreshing or clearing the campaign history from one campaign could trigger and clear the history from multiple others. In this case, what we're going to do is say, when this campaign here, broadcast part 1, runs and completes, that will then trigger part 2 of this campaign to then run part 2. Now, this all happens automatically, so there's no further intervention needed once this campaign is ran. Now, where this can be really useful, in this example, we just have a 2-stage campaign. Now, if you had a wider customer journey, you could daisy chain a series of multiple campaigns together. Now, previously, what you'd have to do for all these campaigns to trigger sequentially would be to schedule these to run at specific times. So we could have journey 1 run at 9 AM, journey 1.1 and 2 run at 9:05, and part 3 run at 9:10. Now, a lot of work, a lot of planning, and a lot of scheduling that had to be done. With the new feature, all we would have to do is schedule campaign 1 to run, and then link all of the other campaigns to that. So a much easier way of building a much more powerful and complex journey with a lot less work involved. So now we've set this link step in here and we have our audience. We're going to go ahead, save our campaign and then run it. Now we'll get a few options here, usually the standard message warning us that we're about to run a live campaign. Now this is followed up with an additional message now to say this campaign has linked actions associated with it. At this stage, we have the option of either running just this one campaign if you needed to manually push a campaign through, or you can confirm and run all of the subsequent linked actions. So we're going to go ahead and run this, which is pulling the audience from our Venn diagram now into the campaign, which will then pull through into our decision splits. Now for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you might notice an additional option here in the top right corner, which is cancel task. Now historically, we only had the close progress option available, which some people have been guilty of in the past. Won't mention any names, who have just closed this thinking that would cancel the campaign, where in fact it just hit the menu. So eagerly awaited, but this now allows us to, if we wanted to cancel a campaign mid-flow, click this icon, which will just stop the campaign running dead in its tracks. Now, while this campaign is progressing, we will see this audience get pushed through into the communication, the link to running. Now, once all of this data is tagged and complete, we'll get a message for this, where we will then see part 2 of the campaign, now complete, go yellow, as that begins processing as well. And we'll also get a notification once campaign part 2 has also successfully ran without any further intervention. There we go. So opening campaign part 2 now, we can see this has successfully ran and data has flowed through.
So this connects on nicely to another new feature that's been added, which is the auto refresh function added to the schedule tab. So earlier versions of the platform always required marketers to set up schedules for campaign refreshes. So for example, you could create a new schedule item so your campaign would run every 5 minutes. But this would obviously be really inefficient, as your campaign would be run every 5 minutes, whether there's data present or not. So ultimately, this could actually slow your system down. So instead of this, the Engage 2020.2 has introduced this new auto refresh functionality that actually allows your system to automatically create scheduled campaign refreshes. So to get access to this, you can see that there is a new auto refresh sub-tab, which contains a new set of options. This allows automatic scheduling based on waits or responses rather than a repeating time frame.
That's correct. So on our campaign, you can see at the moment we have everyone waiting on a wait step. Now we have no triggers for this campaign other than part 1 running. So at some stage we'll want this data to naturally move off the wait and receive a communication. So as Brendan said, historically you have to schedule these to run continuously to move that data along. With this new feature, we can just tick either of these options or a combination of the two. So whenever one of these criteria is complete, the campaign will automatically run, refresh, and move data along. So here we have it set to wait after the next refresh is complete. So on our wait step here, this is set to run wait for 5 minutes. Now, in a real marketing scenario, that might be waiting for a week, as we've labeled here. What this is doing from our campaign run, the clock has already started against these records. So at some stage in the next few minutes, the wait step of 5 minutes will be complete and the data will automatically move on. Now, you're not just limited to waits. The other combinations available are waits and responses from campaigns, which is much more key to being dynamic and jumping on a customer's open or click or purchase. So there's a few combinations of responses available. We can either tell this to refresh after we've received X amount of responses. So if we would say after 1,000 responses, that will push the data through in one batch. Obviously, you wouldn't want the campaign to trigger and run after every 1 response, because on a larger scale campaign, that would just be continuously firing. The other option is to batch that and refresh every X minutes. So we could say after every 1,000 responses or after every 15 minutes, whichever occurs first, that will then trigger the data to move through. So this is a great natural step in being able to build a truly automated campaign without having to manage and schedule your own refresh times, and as the campaign almost becomes self-perpetuating dynamic in when it should or shouldn't run.
So with all the campaigns all triggered successfully or waiting to send, we can now look at how we can alter the campaign output. This is actually another new feature of the 2020.2 release. So if you click on the communication stage in your campaign, you now have a set of additional options to allow you to sort the campaign output. So users can actually select fields to sort by, so for example, a lifetime value, and you can then dictate if the sort is ascending or descending. With our campaign complete, Engage will now have created a number of campaign history records within the campaign usage section of the tools page. It does this to allow you to create selections and queries based on such history. So this is a good place where we can now show you another new feature, the campaign pruning. Campaign pruning will allow you to easily remove any non-essential campaign history records, because as time passes, the necessity for you to query campaigns at such a granular level diminishes. So instead of stockpiling all this data, campaign pruning can help remove it. This will really help maintain your system performance as each campaign's history grows, ensuring your system will always remain quick and healthy. So how does it work, Dan?
So to prune the unwanted data, we have a number of options available. So when we right-click on any campaign, we have options available to delete either the history records, which will be all live runs. We can delete the trial history, which is all trial and practice runs, or we can prune this data for both live and trial data. So the difference between deleting and pruning, deleting will obviously remove all instances of data for this campaign, whereas pruning will remove what we would call less essential data. So as we can see from our campaign around here, this has generated 126,000 rows of data for campaign history. Now, a lot of that data, this will store per person, per step, all the information that's taken place. So when they became on the audience, the dynamic split and the decisions that were made to drive the records through the campaign. Now, for a marketer, most of this information is just noise at this stage. The key information we'll want to retain is who was added to the campaign, any steps for communications or link tos or tags or anything that we want to call back on later in time. However, things like decision splits aren't necessarily going to be a key driver for querying campaign history down the line. What the pruning allows us to do is really remove out this non-essential data while still retaining the key information needed if we do need to make campaign history selections down the line. So to do this, we can select our campaign and we have the option to either delete everything or prune the history. So when we select prune the history records, this will tell us which run numbers we have history against. So we could either prune all runs or we could select a specific run and prune that instead. So what we're going to do is select the campaign run we just did and prune the history for this. So we're just really streamlining the data retained behind the scenes. So this will give us a bit of a blur there for which run number we're clearing. Now this is an irreversible action, so you do have to be careful that you are pruning the right campaign, the right run number, and this is all appropriate to do so. Now, depending on the number of or the volume of data that's being removed, this can take some time. So this will give you a notification when that is complete. Now, small campaign, so that took 1 whole second to complete. But we can see that 126,000 records has now been reduced to 76,000. So it's just storing the key information required for the audience and communication steps. Now, if you're like me and you want to minimize the amount of administration you are doing, there are some handy tools for managing this. So within the campaign options as an admin, you can set some default rules for how often campaign history data can be retained. So in our system, we have a default that after 14 days, any data that hasn't been pruned will be, and after 365 days, campaign history data is deleted. Now, these are obviously optional settings. However, if you are typically pruning data quite often, these can just be a helpful way of keeping the system quite nice and light and nicely maintained. So the next new feature we'll be looking at is the ability to schedule exports and output data at different levels and at different schedules. How this differs to a campaign historically is campaigns would only be allowed to output at predefined levels. So if you're marketing to an individual or a household or an email address, these would be the only levels you can output data at. So with this new feature, what this allows us to do is output data at other table levels on a schedule without needing to run through a campaign. So if we want to take a particular output, let's say everyone based on loyalty. So if we were to take all of our gold loyal customers, we might have this data output to a mailing house or a more customer focused team that can call, SMS, or maybe social media to follow them through. So what we can do is take their customer key, their lifetime spend, and maybe some of their name data, first name, last name, and we'll just drop this data on. Now, historically, you do have the option to download this data. Now, what the download feature will do, as we're using a web-based interface, is this will download directly to our computer. Now, this feature is only available if you're an administrator for the obvious reasons of not wanting to download data to your device without permission. What the new option does is the ability to actually export data. Now, this uses our new feature here for export options, where we can select a predefined output channel, similar to a campaign, but not quite. So these could go to an FTP or a location local to your database, to your infrastructure, any sort of server elsewhere that's not local to your machine. And these can be ran on a schedule. So if you wanted to have this run as a daily output of customers to go to your mailing house, you could set this up on a schedule. So we could save this selection as our Royal Gold output, where we now have the ability to add a schedule for how often this data will output. So this could be a daily export. It can go out every day at 9 AM. Now what this will do every day is rerun our query. So as our, hopefully, loyal customers grow as a customer base, it will continue to output this data once a day and go to our appropriate location. Now, benefits to this, as I said, are if you are outputting any transactional data, which you wouldn't typically have as a campaigning level, this is a really useful way of being able to output data on a schedule to a reporting suite or to a third party if they were to validate or call or send any DMs to that data. So next we're going to hand over back to Brendan, who's going to show us through the next feature available, which is the email design interface.
Thanks, Dan. Just going to log back in here from there. Okay, so now log back in. So what I'm going to do now is actually take you through another important change, but this one was actually introduced in the 2020.1 release, but it does relate to another feature that's been added in 2020.2, which is why we're going to give you a quick run through it now. This feature is actually called the email design interface, and it provides Engage with its own creative design interface, which allows you to create your own email creatives within the platform. You can also use this function to create a suite of ready-made bespoke templates that other people can then use within your organization. At present, this feature is only available via a separate license and currently works with just BlueMailer clients. So speak to your BlueVenn customer success manager, account manager, or project lead for more information on this. Just one thing I will say is that I'm not going to actually cover this in any great detail. I'm not going to go through all the bells and whistles of the interface. But I'm just going to provide you with a flavour of how it works, really just to set up the newer feature, which we're going to come on to later. So if you'd like to see a more in-depth demo of this, then please do get in touch with it, and we'll only be too pleased to take you through it in greater detail. So to start building your creative, if I go over and select my campaigns and then click on the new panel here, this will then open up the create menu there. Now what this will do is show you all the different options that you would usually see, but you will now see that there is a creative box. If that doesn't appear, that means you don't have a license to use it, so you will need to talk to us about getting that. When this opens up, this will present you with several starter templates, which are all available for you to use, and you can now select one for the basis of your email. So you can see here there's a blank creative, a complete blank canvas, which will enable you to go in and start adding in your own details. There's also a one specially created to help you create a newsletter or a promotion or so forth, as well as a one column, two column creative as well. Note there's also this one called Introduction Email Web Signups. That's actually one that I created earlier. So if you do create one within the system and you add all your company logos, your branding, your color schemes and so forth, and you think, wow, this is really cool, we can now use this one going forward, you can save it back as a template for other people to use. So let's just dive in and give you a quick word about what this actually looks like. So if I go into the newsletter creative as an example, if I click on this, this will then open up this template. Now, this is just a handy start point. All these templates can be completely molded to your own requirements anyway. But as you can see, when you open it up, you get this whole interface which enables you to start going in and creating your email. The creative page will show, and there are three main elements to it. So the first thing you'll see here is the creative panel, which quite obviously is where you will build your creative. So you can click on any of these boxes, you can add in your logo, you can change your text for your title, add a main hero image in there if you so wish, and then add in any of the other content you wish. And that's directly related to this panel here. This is the content panel, which will enable you to govern what you can actually see here. So if you click on any of these logos, you'll be able to set the width, change the image, the alignments, the link URL, and all that sort of stuff. You can also choose the rows. If you go into rows here, this will show you all the different column setups in the rows. So as you can see, each row here has a 1 column, or this row can have a small 2 column and a larger 1 column in there as well. And this will dictate the formatting of this particular email. Next to that, you will see the settings, and this will enable you to create the general design rules for your email. So you can set the general content width, the background color, the area, background color, default fonts, link colors, and so forth. And that will affect the entire template itself. So what you can do is just add in any of the content that you wish, and then you can start building. So kind of rather than walking you through this process and taking up some of more of your time, what I'll do is I'll show you one that I created earlier. So if I drag this one out, it's a very simple one. It literally took me a matter of a few seconds to create. I'm just going to drag this in here. So you can see this is one, very simple. Just created it just to demonstrate what this looks like. So you can see that same 2-column environment on top where I've dropped in now the logo, I've got my content name, and notice that you've got the sort of personalization you can include in there as well. You've got your images, text, call to action, social media buttons, and so forth. So let's just show you how you can add in more content to this, just to give you a flavor of how this works. If I go to the rows section here, because I want to add in a new section, and maybe I want a 2-column row in here, I can just click, drag, and drop it exactly where I want it. So I can put this anywhere in the email where I want it. I'm actually going to just put it at the bottom there. So I'm going to drop it in there. And now we've got 2 content sections for me to add in exactly what I want to see. And now it's just a case of me going to my content tab and now just adding the content that I want. So my first column, I want an image. So I'm going to just drag my image, drop it in there. And next to that, I want some accompanying text. So I'm going to just drop that in there. And now you can just add in the image and the text that you wish. So what I'm going to do now is go to my image, I can click on browse, and this will enable me to look at all the images that I've previously uploaded to the platform. And there's a number of different images in here. If the images are not on the platform, you can easily just click on upload, and that will enable you to upload the image. Or you can search for free photos, which searches all those royalty-free free sites, things like Unsplash and Pixabay and things like that, to try and find an image of choice in there. I'm just going to choose this particular image here. So all I need to do is just click on it. It will then upload that into my my image placeholder, and then I can just drop in whichever text that I want to put in. So I'm just going to go here to choose my text I've already got open on a separate page, and I'm just copied that. And now what I'm going to do is just click in here, and I'm just going to paste that in like that. And as you can see, with all these sort of anything that you drop in, you get full control over this. So if you want to change the column, the text sizes, you can do. You can change the alignment, the bold, underline, strike through, any of those sorts of things. You even get to change the text color, the link color, the line height. You can add padding and so forth. And even if you could select the entire region that you're in, you can go up here and change any of these sorts of things, like the row background color, content background color. So in here, I can actually put in my hex code of what I actually want to put in here. So let me just change this to what I want it to be. So if we change this so it goes a nice color of BlueVenn blue, I'm just going to type this in like this, and you can actually see it's changing according to what I'm typing in. But I'm going to type that in there, and that's now changed that to that color that I want to use there. So it gives you that degree of control over everything that you've done. And once your email's created, you can then go to your menu along the top, where you can then choose to save this to return to later, or this is where you can now save this as a template. So if you want this to be used by other people that have access to the Engage platform, you can save on that. And you can also do things like add structure visibility, so you can toggle this on and off, which will give you the little markings, really giving you clear indication of all the different regions. They won't show up on your finished email. You can also do a preview. This will enable you to see what your email will look like in desktop or mobile view, so you can see exactly what that looks like. And then finally, there is the ability to send a test email. So you can pop in your email address in there, and that will enable you to send that test email if you so wish. So that's really just to give you a very quick flavor of how this actually works. The reason why we thought we'd introduce it here, even though it was brought out in the last release, is there is a brand new feature that's been added to this, which is the HTML creative. I'm now just going to pass you over to Dan, who's going to just take you through that side of things, just to connect these two areas together.
Thanks, Brendan. So as mentioned, the newest feature for the creative editor is actually the addition of a HTML creative adder. So what this allows us to do, rather than needing to build all of our content through the creative editor, as Brendan showed, is actually being able to import our own HTML for a HTML-based email. Now, this can be especially useful for users that use a creative agency to build their content, or people like me who have no idea about HTML, heavily rely on the marketing team to build the content for us. So courtesy of BlueVenn Marketing, we've actually got a HTML email that was sent out to promote the Join 2020 event. So what we're able to do is paste the HTML script into this editor here, where this will then allow us to include this in any campaigns within Engage and preview within the tool as well. So now we've pasted this in, we'll set our subject line. So this will be for Join 2020. And here we have the option to save our HTML. Once done, we have the ability to preview this. So we can see that's taken all of the script, all of the URLs, all of the formatting that would have been built external to this. So here we can set our own IDs, our own tags. Once then, this all becomes just live as if we were sending this email through any tool. So once that is available, you do have the option to view a plain text alternative as well, if those have been set up. And as it is part of Engage, you can add notes. So if you are adding and changing and updating these as you go, you can collaborate with other users to make those changes. Now you do have the option for both classic and triggered campaigns. So classic campaigns being the canvas or any cascade segmentation. With the triggered campaigning, this uses the more near real-time triggers and API calls to trigger those campaigns automatically. So you can use HTML content for both. Now, once the HTML has been added, you've seen the preview and you're happy with that. Again, in the hamburger menu, you have the option to either save, create copies, or send a test email here, where you can add your email address or send it to a distribution group to send as a seed, just to test that it's all working as planned.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the new features for Engage 2020.2. We're now going to move on and look at the new stuff that's been added for Unified 2020.2. Okay, so these are the items that are going to be part of the 2020.2 release. We're just going to go through each one now, just telling you a little bit about each one as we go through the next set of slides. First up, we have some API enhancements. This is a new feature requested by one of our clients, and we always like to listen to our clients. So what we did here was we added 2 pieces of existing data into the API response, magic number 1, magic number 2. This allowed our client to add custom URLs to the bottom of their emails, which allowed the recipients really to go in directly into their record within Unify and make any updates or changes, all via a simple web form that the client created. This is a really neat feature. So if you're a Unify user and you think this will be something you'd like to take advantage of, get in touch. Next, we've added an automatic password expiry notification. So within Unify, a user can have a password expiry schedule to manage. So we've now added a notification mechanism which will trigger an email to be sent out to the user, which will remind them when their expiry date is near. At the moment, the default is set to 5 days, but that of course can be configurable to your own requirements or set up within the platform. We've also added some ETL load enhancements to the system, and this is for when transactional data is delivered to us in a parent-child relationship layout. This means that the child record is never really connected to the parent record, the person, the customer, but it is connected to an order, which of course is connected to the customer. There are quite a few examples of this that we are seeing within the retail and leisure sectors. So previously, Unify would run a post-processing step to connect all of this up. So we've now enhanced this process, which allows these 2 records to be added one after the other without having to do the post-processing step. We've also made some changes to the bulk merge process performance. Before this enhancement, the bulk merge process used to have to go through a large decision tree procedure to decide which records it needed to merge. And that process ran in small batches behind the scenes, so it wouldn't interfere with the normal workings of Unify. However, when we then processed huge data sets, the performance can suffer. So we've looked at the process in its entirety and re-engineered it. And as a result, we've made some huge savings with regards to merging performance. So you can now see it's actually gone from 150 per minute to 5,000 per minute. But the good thing is nothing's actually changed for the user interface. So people will be able to use it regardless of any changes that we've made in the background. Next, we've made some changes to the address profiling. This change has come about as a result of an increase in profiling being added to addresses. And this is because we discovered that US profiling was very different to UK and Europe. So we've tweaked the system to allow address profiling to be added dynamically, therefore allowing a system to have its own set of address profiling. We've made the change in such a way that Unify users or admins wouldn't have to learn anything new within the platform. So we've altered the profile administration part of the system. We've created a new drop-down that says person, site, and address. And when this is selected, you can then start adding profile to it. As part of this, we added the dynamic profile data through the ETL. So if any source data that is being imported into the ETL will be able to be mapped successfully onto the newly created profile fields. Next, we've got Preference Center custom HTML stylings. The Preference Center now allows custom HTML styling to be applied. So clients can now apply their own branding by uploading their own HTML and then mapping that into fields within Unify. This came about as a request again from a client who said they wanted to apply their own branding and style to our forms. So this enables clients to create their own HTML styling and present this to Unify. Unify will then map this process to a form. They can map those fields and then display the custom HTML form. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, then do get in touch with us and we can talk you through the process and talk about what we can do to help you. So now we're moving on to the final feature of the presentation, which is the Unify to Engage real-time connector. And this is a really exciting new development, as it will give users the ability to collect data in real time and push it through into Engage, and then through various communication channels and onto the customer in real time. So what have we done? What have we actually changed here? Well, we've added 2 new menu items. So there's now the Engage API. This will enable you to connect to an Engage instance, and there's the Engage connector, which tells it what to do. In the system itself, it's as easy as adding a new API connection. You add all the correct API connection credentials, and then you simply press test. And if you're successful, you get that message that we can see at the bottom of the slide there. On completion of this, it will then also read Engage from all the external tables that exist for that system. You'll also be able to add new external tables in Engage through this process. The external tables are shown here, and when you check on one, you'll be able to read all the fields that Engage has set up. And we can then allow each of these fields to be mapped to Unify fields. So when the data comes into the system, it will need to know what unified field we are sending off to Engage. And then there's a simple mapping process to then undertake. You can then set the triggers. What event do you want to happen to send this information to Engage? So we've set up triggers within Unify to say, when we've received certain data, we're going to trigger the data send to Engage. And this is the real-time connector in a nutshell. If you want to learn more about that, then please don't hesitate in getting in touch with us, and we can give you a proper walkthrough of this part of the system. And this brings us to the end of the release webinar. We really hope that you found this interesting. I hope you found it really useful, and it's taught you about some of the new features that are coming up. If you do have any questions about the content, then please don't hesitate in getting in touch with myself or Dan or any of the customer success team or your account manager, and we'll be able to help you with that. So thanks very much. I hope this has been useful, and thank you very much for watching.